Waverly Hills Sanatorium, located in Louisville, Kentucky, is one of the most infamous sites in the United States, shrouded in eerie legends and tragic history. Long before it became a hospital, the land was home to a quiet family estate, with a small schoolhouse named after the Waverly novels by Sir Walter Scott. The name evoked a sense of literary charm and peaceful seclusion, but the serenity of Waverly Hills would not last. As tuberculosis, then known as the White Plague, ravaged the nation in the early 20th century, Jefferson County found itself at the heart of an epidemic. The disease, highly contagious and deadly, spread rapidly through Louisville, particularly in the wetlands surrounding the Ohio River, where the damp conditions provided an ideal breeding ground for tuberculosis bacteria. Seeking an isolated location believed to offer fresh air and therapeutic benefits, city officials transformed Waverly Hills into a sprawling sanatorium where patients could receive long-term care in hopes of recovery. However, treatment options at the time were crude and experimental, often more painful than the disease itself. Doctors subjected patients to grueling procedures such as thoracoplasty, a brutal surgery in which ribs were removed to collapse an infected lung, and artificial pneumothorax, a risky method of introducing air into the pleural cavity to restrict bacterial growth. These treatments were considered groundbreaking, yet they often resulted in severe complications or death. Initially built to accommodate only 50 patients, Waverly Hills quickly became overcrowded as tuberculosis cases surged, forcing the hospital to expand. At its peak, the sanatorium housed over 400 patients, many of whom never left alive. By the late 1930s, tuberculosis had become the leading cause of death in Kentucky, placing an immense strain on Waverly Hills. The mortality rate soared, and with deaths occurring almost daily, staff struggled to keep up with the grim reality of their work. To prevent panic among patients and the public, hospital administrators devised a morbidly practical solution: a hidden tunnel beneath the building, later known as the body chute. This long, sloping passage allowed hospital workers to discreetly transport corpses from the upper floors to a waiting hearse or crematorium without alarming the remaining patients. The tunnel became a grim symbol of the sanatorium's dark past, its walls steeped in the sorrow of the thousands who perished within Waverly's confines. Though the advent of antibiotics like streptomycin in the 1940s drastically reduced tuberculosis cases, Waverly Hills remained operational until 1961, when it officially shut its doors. Over time, the abandoned hospital gained a sinister reputation, its crumbling halls said to be haunted by the spirits of those who suffered there. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and skeptics alike have flocked to the site, reporting eerie phenomena, disembodied footsteps echoing through empty corridors, ghostly whispers drifting through the air, and shadowy figures darting past doorways. The most infamous location is the 5th floor, particularly room 502, where legend claims that a nurse took her own life under mysterious circumstances. Visitors to this room have reported an overwhelming sense of dread, unexplainable temperature drops, and even encounters with the spectral figure of a woman in white. Today, Waverly Hills stands as both a historic landmark and a paranormal hotspot, drawing those curious about its tragic past and ghostly lore. Whether one believes in the supernatural or not, the echoes of history still linger in the hollowed-out rooms, whispering stories of suffering, loss, and the relentless passage of time. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium stands as one of the most chilling and historically significant medical institutions in the United States, located in the Waverly Hills neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Its origins, however, were far more humble than the dark and tragic reputation it would later acquire. In the early 1900s, Jefferson County found itself in the grips of a relentless tuberculosis outbreak, often referred to as the White Plague. The disease spread with alarming speed, particularly in the low-lying, swampy regions near the Ohio River, where the humid environment provided a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. With Louisville facing one of the highest tuberculosis infection rates in the country, health officials sought a way to contain the epidemic. In response, a small two-story sanatorium was erected in 1910 to house and treat patients afflicted with the disease. The facility could only accommodate between 40 and 50 individuals at a time, operating under the belief that fresh air, rest, and isolation were the most effective treatments. However, as tuberculosis cases skyrocketed, it became clear that the modest wooden structure was insufficient. The hospital soon reached capacity, forcing administrators to turn away many desperate patients who had no other place to go. Recognizing the dire need for a larger facility, city officials approved the construction of a new, state-of-the-art hospital that would become one of the largest and most advanced tuberculosis treatment centers of its time. The land that would become Waverly Hills had an entirely different purpose before its transformation into a medical institution. In 1883, Major Thomas H. Hayes purchased the property to build a home for his family. At the time, the area was remote, far removed from the bustling city of Louisville, and lacked even the most basic educational infrastructure. Determined to provide his daughters with a proper education, Hayes established a one-room schoolhouse on Pages Lane and hired Lizzie Lee Harris as the school's teacher. Harris, an admirer of Sir Walter Scott's Waverly novels, named the institution Waverly School. Major Hayes was so fond of the name's elegance that he adopted it for his entire estate, calling the land Waverly Hill. Years later, when the Board of Tuberculosis Hospital acquired the property to construct the sanatorium, they decided to retain the name. At some point, the spelling was altered to Waverly Hills, though exactly when or why this change occurred remains unclear. Over the decades, both spellings have appeared in historical documents, adding to the enigmatic nature of the site's past. By the early 1920s, the original wooden hospital had deteriorated significantly due to constant repairs and increasing demand. In 1924, construction began on a massive 5-story facility designed to accommodate over 400 patients and withstand the test of time. The new Waverly Hills Sanatorium officially opened its doors on October 17, 1926, ushering in a new era of tuberculosis treatment. Patients at Waverly Hills underwent a variety of treatments, many of which would be considered barbaric by today's standards. Surgical procedures such as thoracoplasty, which involved the removal of ribs to collapse an infected lung, and artificial pneumothorax, which attempted to limit bacterial growth by introducing air into the pleural cavity, were commonly performed. These treatments, while experimental and often excruciating, were among the only options available before the discovery of antibiotics. Despite the facility's best efforts, tuberculosis continued to claim thousands of lives. By the 1930s, Waverly Hills had become synonymous with suffering and death. The mortality rate was so high that the hospital administration constructed a concealed tunnel, later dubbed the body chute, to discreetly transport corpses away from the facility without alarming the surviving patients. This underground passage stretched several hundred feet down the hillside, leading to a waiting hearse or a nearby crematorium. Though intended to maintain morale among patients, the tunnel has since become one of the most infamous and haunting aspects of Waverly Hills' history. The breakthrough discovery of streptomycin in 1943 marked the beginning of the end for Waverly Hills as a tuberculosis hospital. As cases steadily declined, the need for such a massive facility diminished. In 1961, after serving thousands of patients over more than 5 decades, Waverly Hills officially shut its doors. The remaining patients were transferred to Hazelwood Sanatorium in Louisville, and the once bustling hospital fell into abandonment. Over the years, various proposals were made for repurposing the building, including plans to transform it into a luxury hotel. However, these efforts never came to fruition, and Waverly Hills instead gained notoriety as one of the most haunted locations in America. Paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and thrill seekers have all ventured into its decaying halls, reporting chilling encounters with shadowy figures, unexplained whispers, and eerie footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The fifth floor, particularly room 502, has become a focal point for ghost stories, with some claiming to have seen the apparition of a nurse who allegedly died under mysterious circumstances. Today, Waverly Hills remains a legendary site, both for its tragic medical history and its reputation as one of the scariest haunted hospitals in the world. So terrifying that even some law enforcement officers refuse to set foot inside after dark. Whether one is drawn by the history of the hauntings, Waverly Hills stands as a haunting reminder of the suffering endured by those who once called it home.